Another edition of Outside Shots presented by TheLines.com. Digging into the March Madness bracket. Remember, if you're looking to get bonus bets, BetMGM is giving away plenty of them. $150 worth of bonus bets. When you bet $5, you get $150 with your first bet using promo code TheLines, one word. Terms and conditions apply over at TheLines.com. And if you're watching or listening to us in North Carolina, sports betting is live there, so check out TheLines.com for all of our North Carolina sports betting promos, the best in the business, and you can find all of our bets for March Madness in real time. The link is over at TheLines.com in the top right-hand corner for our free Discord channel. I'm Eli Hershkovich, and without further ado, it's time to be joined by Jason Lisk. He is the college basketball content man over at TeamRankings.com and PoolGenius. What's going on today, Jason?
Oh, we've now had a full 24 to digest. We're now into the second day. We are looking at just like, are we wrong on any teams? What do we need to reevaluate? We're going to do a little bit of evaluation, but yeah, we're plowing toward games tonight and a full Thursday that has lots of compelling matchups.
Absolutely. Recording this here on Tuesday, March 19th, which includes the first two games in the first four. But let's talk about PoolGenius, because if you look in our description here on this show on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast, you can find a link to PoolGenius where you can get their product for just $39 throughout March Madness, which includes bracket picks, survivor pool advice, and Calcutta advice as well. So for our listeners and viewers, Jason, explain the product in detail and what goes into these simulations.
Yeah, so we have three main products, as you mentioned. Bracket picks being by far the biggest and the one that's been around the longest, and then survivor pools and Calcutta tools. So with bracket picks, what we do is we've done lots of research over the years. We have our own power ratings. We spend lots of time over the last 3 weeks. I've been not sleeping much over the last few weeks as we dig into teams. We know generally who was in. I missed on St. John's. I had them written up, but we had most of the teams already evaluated. And so we have we're developing notes, and then we're monitoring injuries. And so we're taking our raw power, what I would call a raw power ratings, just like a spreadsheet. What point margins, same thing you would see on a Ken Palm or, at any other rating site. And we are then making adjustments to that based on our assessments of current lineups, changes we see, especially important for mid-majors. Mid-majors have a lot of things where people don't pay much attention. If you can identify which teams are making runs because they've actually changed lineups or got people healthy versus randomness, three-point shooting, whatever, I think you can have a little edge there on which teams to bump up a little more. So we make plus or minus adjustments to our raw ratings, and then those go into simulations, and we run those simulations for the brackets to develop our odds, like how many times each team reaches a certain round. And then we take public pick data. So we do all those things. And so when you come to us after Monday, now that the brackets are open, you can set up as many pools as you want for brackets. You can tell us your rules, your size, and we will give you pick recommendations for those specific details, because we're going to tell you to do things differently to win a super big pool or one where you get bonus points for upsets than we are to beat 20 of your friends. And so we're going to give you different advice for those types of pools, but you can set up as many as you want. And then, of course, the Survivor and Calcutta tools are built off that. They also look at things like odds, advancement odds, the same underlying data we generated with that process I described.
And let's start off with the differential between large pools versus small pools and how to go about that in general. Something that I found very interesting on your site, digging into a lot of your articles, is when you think about a large pool, some members, some contestants may decide to not pick a lot of upsets, but typically that's the way you want to go, versus in a small pool, you kind of want to do the opposite.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a small pool for sure, generally speaking, you want to think about what your baseline chances of winning are, right? If I can place top 3 out of 30 and I win money, I'm 1 in 10 to cash, right? And so do I want to take a lot of positions on outcomes that I think are less than 10% likely through the bracket? Do I want to take a 4% champ Probably not, even though if I like them, right? Because I'm giving up some equity if I'm like rejecting one of the, say, the top 3 favorites, even if I think other people are going to pick them. So things like that in small pools. In large pools, upsets, yes, but I think sometimes what the strategy we see is concentrated upsets, big gambles. Like I'm going to take a shot on this team to go to the Final Four that is like picked by 1 in 1,000, but I think it has a 5 in 1,000 chance. I'm going to push all in on that outcome. And then I may be as more conservative elsewhere, but I'm pushing in on a big outcome in a large pool, basically trying to say I've got pot odds on that outcome, or maybe 2 or 3 outcomes. Like I'm playing this team here and this team here. I'm not going to scattershot it on like 10 upsets in the first round.
Looking at the survivor pool next up here,
Yep.
A couple of teams that may have some future value. Arizona on your site, you guys give them 5 stars in terms of futures value. Tennessee and Iowa State as well. So dig into the reasoning behind the quote-unquote future value there.
Yeah, so that future value number, so it's based on odds to get to the Final Four and beyond. And coming out of the region, we've got the Arizona, and the betting market has them as the favorite there, even though North Carolina is the 1 seed. And so it's assessing, what are the chances you need this team later on in Survivor? And because it's big in Survivor pools in NCAA, you got to think about, who do I want in a Final Four if they're still alive? And so that's to hopefully help you plan that. It's based on our advancement numbers, and it's based on kind of odds to get deep, because where you really run out of picks is that Final Four. Once you make the Elite 8 pick, if you haven't planned well, you may get blocked and you're done. The worst thing in a survivor pool is to be done, right? You can't make a pick. You haven't lost, but you can't make a pick, and somebody else can't. So planning ahead is important there. Obviously, any outcome can happen. You're taking educated risks everywhere. We're just trying to give you where we have some higher odds of a team being in the Final Four relative to others near them. And so that's kind of what that is assessing. And then I think a good way to look at it, one way we like to look at, what are your odds of winning now versus what are the odds the team burns you later? And if you balance those two things, you're looking for basically teams that you think have a high chance of winning now, but maybe they have a tough draw, or maybe, they're just not as good as other people think, but they're good now. They have a good matchup. Those are like the ideal picks early in the survivor pool.
Among those teams we discussed, Arizona maybe being the highlighted quote unquote top pick in terms of maybe even value for a Calcutta, if you want to go that route, especially since they exited in the semifinal of the Pac-12 tournament, maybe not the most popular team, and then you consider the perception of that conference in general. Yeah. Would you consider looking at the Wildcats in that regard, or maybe another team that has your interest?
Yeah, I do think Arizona is probably going to be a team that, if you use our numbers, is going to come at value in Calcutta pools, where the number we say you should get them at, you may not have to go there, just based on public popularity data. In bracket pools, I obviously don't have data. We don't have robust data on Calcutta pools specifically, but people tend to behave the same. If they like North Carolina twice as much in bracket pools, they're probably going to like North Carolina in Calcutta pools and bidding up on them relative to Arizona. So, that's why you're seeing value on Arizona, because the market says Arizona slightly and the public is saying North Carolina. If you like North Carolina, you should be in the futures market, by the way, because that's where you're getting like 2-1 over some other contenders. Their odds are longer. But in bracket pools, they're popular, and I suspect in Calcutta.
One team that has my interest, Jason, I want to get your thoughts on them. A Final Four futures bet that I made over the weekend was Wisconsin, a team I've liked all year long. And regression is one quote-unquote metric, or when you dive into what goes into regression, that I like to mention and dig into a lot. And the Badgers finally got some positive variance, positive regression over the weekend of the Big Ten tournament when it came to their three-point efficiency. Yes. From the beginning of February through before the Big Ten tournament began, their conference tournament, they shot around 30% from behind the arc, and they shot above 40% in the Big Ten tournament. You can call that a small sample size. To me, for a team that could space you 5 out, I would consider that a team beginning to play more towards its norm or peak value. And considering they opened at some sports books at 20-1 to make the Final Four, that was a pretty good bet to me for potential top 25 team, at least when you go back to non-conference play when their shooting splits were closer to their norm. And then they're going to be a popular upset pick on the flip side of that, because James Madison being the 12 seed, you and I both know that people picking in brackets, large or small pools, love to take 5, 12 seeds, and the 12 seed being the upset pick just because of historical data. But on the flip side of the regression conversation that I was having with Wisconsin, James Madison may be due for some 3-point regression, just because you look at their 3-point shooting splits from the beginning of February onward, they shot above 40%. And before that, they were shooting in the low 30% range when it came to their perimeter efficiency. So also free throw efficiency. Yeah. James Madison shooting close to 70%. A couple variables to me that I would keep in mind. A, when you're looking at maybe avoiding the trendy upset, and B, a team that can make a deep run that is playing closer to their expectation.
I'll give you a couple. We do team notes on teams when we dig in. You gave a lot of good nuggets on Wisconsin. We have some similar type stuff, maybe not as deep into the shooting stuff, but here's some of the. I'll just read you some of the team notes we had on Wisconsin, as I think they are an undervalued team. So I think James Madison is good. I think people may be disregarding that Wisconsin's probably better than what they look like at Big Ten play for the regular season. Wisconsin didn't have any starter injuries until Chucky Hepburn missed. However, backup point guard Kamari McGee missed 11 games with a toe injury. Wisconsin does not have another true backup point guard. So without him, Klesman had to slide over and play more minutes. Hepburn had to play more minutes. The team did worse in those 11 games. So at full strength with another guard, they've been better. They were 14th out of 14 in the Big Ten in 3% made against in conference play alone. In only conference play, they had terrible 3-point luck against as well. And then what did we see? We saw that turnaround in the Big Ten tournament. So when they are at 100% and the luck isn't, we've got the worst shooting percentage against us from outside, they are a contender. Now, it's going to take some upsets. They're going to have to pull some upsets, but they are good enough. And like you said, trendy upset pick, but this is the kind of team in Wisconsin, unlike some other traditional Big Ten teams, I think they can turn people over. They can defend. They can do, like, some of the issues with some of the Big Ten teams we've seen struggle in the tournament is because they play a style where they kind of pack it in and don't play great defense. They're efficient on offense and they don't turn people over. I don't think that's Wisconsin this year.
Yeah, and their ball pressure actually made a pretty big impact in that Big Ten tournament semifinal game against Purdue. The turnover from Zach Edey before the end of regulation into overtime, and then Chucky Hepburn. You mentioned Hepburn drawing the offensive foul on Braden Smith to not only knock Smith out of the game with 5 fouls, but give Wisconsin the ball back down 1, which led to that Klesmit lucky bounce, if we're talking about luck, to give Wisconsin the win over Purdue in the semifinal before losing to Illinois in the Big Ten championship game. And staying in the Big Ten, looking at going back to our initial conversation with bracket picks, one of the games that I would assume is going to be 50-50-ish when you look at selections across bracket pools, large or small, Nebraska and Texas A&M. Yeah. And staying in that same region, the South region, as Wisconsin. And the Big Ten, like I mentioned, Nebraska opening as a 1.5-point favorite. That line still sitting at the point spread that it opened up at. So that pretty much aligns with the notion that this game is going to come down to a coin flip, theoretically. And A&M has been playing much better ball since a starting lineup change and also getting 3-point variants of their own to begin the SEC tournament. Second half didn't play super well against Florida. Nebraska, similar thing. Played well in the first half against Illinois, shot well. Variance went the other direction in the second half in the Big Ten tournament semifinal. What do you make of this very intriguing 8-9 first-round matchup?
It is very intriguing, and these are two teams that we had notable positive adjustments. That is, we bumped them up from their raw rating and said they're better now than their numbers look, based on what the lineup is putting on the court. And unfortunately, they play each other. Because had they been in another 8-9 game, we would have had both probably as a significant pick to advance. If they were going against Florida Atlantic or, one of the other 8-9 situations that I don't think are as strong. Because Nebraska's been good. and they've been better when they've had their full lineup. They've had, guys that were out, not playing as much early in the year. This team is peaking, I think. They maybe ran out of steam in the second half against Illinois, but they're a dangerous draw. And then A&M completely changed who they are with their 3-guard lineup. They went from not being able to score 60 to all of a sudden racking up 80 on the regular. I mean, this team is different with how they're playing now, and they're better. And, we've got Houston on upset alert. Now, I'm not outright picking it. I don't know which to pick to beat them in a bracket, so I'm a little hesitant in that. In a straight-up betting market, though, I dabble in the Sweet 16 to miss lines on Houston because I think either of these teams is peaking and better than people think. One of them is going to knock the other one out and then be dangerous in the second round.
And staying with Houston for a moment here, key injuries, and you can find our full injury report includes literally every single injury over at thelines.com and that write-up from today. Juwan Roberts dealing with a knee injury, and keep in mind Houston also making the Big 12 tournament final despite losing and getting blown out by Iowa State. That's still a lot of wear and tear for a team that doesn't have a lot of depth to begin with, and now Roberts is banged up. Yeah. Seems like he's going to play in the first round and throughout the NCAA tournament, but still something to monitor. Tugler, season-ending injury. Ramon Walker, Terrence Arsenault were banged up and will miss the NCAA tournament as a result. They were dealt with injuries earlier in the season. So shooting-wise, you look at effective field goal percentage, Houston in the 240 range, really good guards in Jamal Shedd and LJ Cryer, but seems to be a trend under Calvin Sampson. Good shot makers, but boy, do they get forced into difficult shots when they aren't turning over opponents, generating transition opportunities, and are slotted more so into half-court sets. Any other high seeds that you may be looking, and when I say high, I'm talking about the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, to maybe juxtaposed to when you think of the traditional low seeds of top 4 seeds overall in the NCAA tournament. Any other team like Houston that you may be looking to fade in a bracket or even betting-wise?
Yeah, I mentioned Houston. You went through a great reason why. I think they're the team, like if you just looked at KenPom or like people that just look at the numbers and don't dig in, they are the highest projected win tournament team in just running those systems based on their raw numbers. But there's reasons, as you outlined, to think they're not the best team in the country right now. It's UConn. And the market agrees with that. And we agree with that. So I would say North Carolina, for this reason, they're pretty popular relative to it's a popularity thing in brackets. They're as popular as Purdue and Houston, and I'm not sure their chances are as high. They've got some balance. I mean, they certainly could do it. You got to take stands somewhere, right? You got to take stands somewhere. So North Carolina, based on popularity reasons, probably Kentucky, based on popularity reasons, is a 3, and also that defense, because we know they can score. But it's Kentucky, and our numbers are again showing they're popular, and as you would expect. And so some of those things pop up, and so those are coming in where they are. I think Purdue's pretty neutral. Some popularity, some concerns, but also one of the top 3 teams that, all year. So
they kind of get a good draw.
Yeah.
Looking at the Midwest region, and the Boilermakers, the number 1 seed in that region. I mentioned the loss to Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament semifinal. I would expect them to truck whichever team they face in the first round, just based off of losing to FDU last year, the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history, with FDU being a 23.5 point underdog. Kind of joking around here, but Zach Edey, I think, may have jumped Hunter Dickinson. Those two teams and those two players may be going toe-to-toe in the literal matchup itself in the Sweet 16. If Kansas gets there, you would expect Purdue to get there and Matt Painter to get back to the Sweet 16. But Edey gets so many calls, as we saw mention it for the final time against Wisconsin. Hunter Dickinson, I've never been a huge fan of, just because of the way he kind of goes against the opposing crowd in a very dramatic fashion and also flops. But Edey, you think about the over-the-back call against Wisconsin, the up and under move that Tyler Wall made in that, I think it was overtime or the beginning of the second half, where the refs didn't call anything on Edey, despite Wall likely should have been going to the free throw line in that instance.
Getting fouled when he runs over players who are standing
right.
still. Yeah.
Is Edie your least favorite player in the tournament, or are you a fan of the Wooden Award winner, likely back-to-back champ?
Yeah, I mean, we got to be like kind here. We don't hate players. It's sports hate, right? It's fun. It's fun. I definitely like. Oh man, come on, give them calls. You definitely have that feeling. I mean, my most hated team to watch is going to be Virginia. And first four, like that team. I don't know how the committee used if they use the eye test, they're blind to put that team in the tournament. That team can't score. It's Jordan Minor setting illegal screens by sticking his knee out 10 times in a possession and getting away with it to generate any offense. It literally is ugly. And now we have to watch it, and it's a standalone game. But yeah, they're not going to go. They shouldn't go very far. I say that and watch them be the team that everybody hates and goes to the Elite Eight unexpectedly because they win 45-40 games. But I digress. Yeah, probably. Let me think who else is in the top group. I don't know that there's anybody else that stands out this year because we don't have like a truly hateable Duke player that has caused too much controversy. I know we have
Kyle Filipowski with the court storm might be up
drama.
there.
Sure. That won't happen in the NCAA tournament, I don't think, but we'll see.
I say it in jest with Edie, but you go back to a couple of years ago, Purdue shooting over 50 free throws against Texas in the second round. Purdue's final, however far they make it, is going to boil down to me at least, how the officials in a given game officiate Zach Edey. Purdue is a much more efficient three-point shooting team than they were last year. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, both gotten better, maybe not so much against the press, but when you look at overall shooting efficiency, getting Lance Jones from Southern Illinois has certainly helped, but still something to keep in mind. No matter how far you have Purdue making it.
Note, they're 4-4 if they turn it over 20% of time or more possessions. That was a bugaboo for them last year. Other top teams haven't had 8 games where they've had 20% possessions. They've cleaned it up for the most part, but they've had their games, and those are the ones they've lost. In the tournament, you may meet teams that can turn you over as you get deeper in the tournament and have the athletic ability to at least kind of stay with Edey and not let him just dominate the game entirely. So that's a concern. Will they go up against teams that can turn them over as they get deep into this tournament?
Right. And looking at teams that will press often, going back to the 5-12 theory, San Diego State making the title game last year as a number 5 seed, the Aztecs a number 5 seed yet again. They press, and their press ranks in the 91st percentile per synergy when you look at how effective it is. And Brian Dutcher, a very experienced tournament coach, different personnel than last year, but taking on a UAB team. We'll see how that goes stylistically between another 5-12 matchup. But Jason, anything else you want to touch on from PoolGenius incentive-wise for our listeners and viewers trying to provide value here for the tournament, or just yet another reason why PoolGenius is the top-rated product to sign up for when you're making your brackets and when you're looking for Survivor and Calcutta advice?
Yeah, I'm going to give you some skinny input. You never know if you're going to get it right. Like the NCAA tournament is a lot of luck, including bracket pools. We do the best we can. We got one shot at it. Actually, we get multiple shots because we tell you different advice for different pool sizes. So some years, small pool advice works. Other years, like last year, in larger pools, Connecticut was one of our top picks. They weren't when we were like dealing with 20 people, 30 people, but once we got big enough, Connecticut was the value play. We had them as probably better than Kansas straight up, but had a tougher path because they had to come through the 5-12, 4-13 quadrant. But so we had Connecticut as bigger, so those types of pools did better last year. We don't know which ones will do better this year, which types of situations. Will our upsets work or will they not? Will the upset pools be the ones that hit? But I'll give you what I think is cool about some of our logic, because smart people can look at a bracket and come up with things. But here, the simulations we run always amaze me, and I'm going to give you one cool example. You generally speaking want to get riskier as we go up in pool size, but there are points that our simulation shows that, let's say you get to like 70 people, right? 60, 70 people to beat. Or what it actually does in some of the brackets is take a value team on one side and take another value team, one of the like top eight contenders, but one who's not likely to be picked at a champ in that size pool. So like there are teams that are only being picked 1.5%, 2% of the time that have a chance, and they're like 3 and 4 seeds. And so it basically pairs those teams because of what you're doing by doing that. And it took me a while to figure out what the simulation was doing. You're basically buying 2 champions, because if it's correct that those teams aren't picked to win the title, you basically bought a team to the final that if they win the title, you win because nobody did put them further than you. And you also have another good team on the other side. So it's basically buying you 2 teams in certain pool sizes where it's like, we're giving you the best team that might not be picked to win and putting them in the final with your other pick. So I think that's a cool like feature. And so anyway, those are some of the strategy things that come up. Check us out. I mean, there's lots of cool data. It runs those simulations. People disagree with some of the stuff, but we've got a proven track record over the years of success against the public by just making solid picks and letting the chips fall where they may.
He is Jason Lisk, college basketball content head over at Team Rankings and PoolGenius. You could sign up for the $39 exclusive offer for March Madness. Help, assistance on your brackets, survivor pool, or Calcutta auction if you're looking to do that with a group of friends or just degenerates. That link is in the description, like I mentioned, on YouTube, or if you subscribe, rate, review, listen to the audio version of this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. You can follow Jason on X at Jason Lisk. Really appreciate the time, Jason, and good luck with your bracket, not just your advice that you're giving out to people that you're expecting some hate or positive, kind words on.
Why, thank you. I hope to win somewhere. I've actually, my best result last year was the women's bracket where I had LSU going deep. And so I'm also going to get into those. But yes, I got to hit one of them. I'm looking forward to some of this, and on to Thursday where we find out where we got it all wrong and where we got it right.
That's going to do it for this edition of Outside Shots presented by thelines.com. Remember to give the video a thumbs up, ring the bell to get notifications whenever we release any new sports betting videos on March Madness or the like, and comment with your thoughts, survivor pick-wise, Calcutta, or your biggest bracket upset in the comments section on YouTube, or leave it as a comment in our iTunes, Spotify review. For Jason, for myself, Eli Hershkovich, thanks for watching and listening to another edition of Outside Shots previewing the NCAA Tournament Bracket. So long, everybody, and good luck with your March Madness picks.